And you are listening to Square Biz Podcast, the official podcast of Flower Square, Sacramento's Black Wall Street, located at 2251 Flower Road, Sacramento, California, 95822. I am your host, Aaron Boyce, and I am with the wonderful and the fantastic Miss. I'll let her introduce herself. That'll be you, Robin.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure which Miss you were referring to. There are several of us on here that are wonderful and fabulous.
Well, yeah, but it's you. Come on. It's you.
Well, hello, Aaron. It is the wonderful and fabulous Robin Rose here.
Yes. And so we have a special podcast. This is the end of year podcast where we talk about all the wonderful things that happened in 2021 and maybe a couple of not so wonderful things. And we're going to also discuss how to prepare for 2022, which just maybe 2022 can be wonderfuler.
Wonderfuler is a possibility. Okay.
It is.
Sure.
It is.
I don't know how much wonderfuler everybody's going to feel after my conversation with Dr. Flojan Kofer, but we'll see. We will see. We
know that we have some wonderful guests, Dr. Flojan Kofer. She is I'm gonna try to say this word, epidemiologist. Did it?
Perfect.
Whoa! Look at me.
Yeah.
I practiced. Okay. And a bunch of other things too. And so,
and so other things. That is probably the best flow description.
Spontaneous dancer, a jokester, a comic nerd, all of those things.
Now see, icon. Those were three of the things that I was not thinking about. But hey, okay. And we have Mr. Marcus Smith, and it says Marcus D. Smith, so don't want to leave that out. He is a writer for Sacramento Bee, and we thank you. I thank you definitely for always bringing some culture to the Bee. You know, your articles have been very, very good, and it's nice getting some love through you from Sacramento Bee. So thank you very much. And then we have another one of our speakers is Mr. Terrence Martin and Terry Moore. He's on too with Center for Fathers and Family. And of course, Terry, he is a poet, and he knows it. Yeah, I said it.
Clearly, that's not in your description.
Well, first of all, Robert, you know it is. I got some skills. Come on. But he's also a very strong advocate for fathers and family and community. And I don't know Mr. Martin, but I'm assuming that Mr. Martin is also an advocate for the community as well, since he is representing here as well. So, Terry, you want to say a little something?
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on here. You have some very profound and amazing people on here. I'm a fan of Dr. Flo. I'm glad she's on here. Terrence is my sidekick, ride or die, and just everybody on here. I have not had an article on me in the Sacramento Bee, but I'm not directing that towards Marcus. I'm just saying, I haven't.
My line is open, Terry. My line is open. That just means you haven't had a chance to meet me. So like the great Christopher Wallace once said, if you don't know, now you know.
Okay.
So reach out to me. Let's talk.
Wonderful.
I'll be reaching out to you and everybody else on here. I can't stay on long. I'm headed to a medical appointment, but I'm glad to be on here and meet some people and see some people. And Aaron, you are an incredible, upstanding man. I thank you for the invitation, you and Robin. And if I didn't catch everybody, trust me, I see everybody on here.
Well, so, thank you, sir.
God bless. I can't wait to hear as much as I can, some great information, some amazing responses, and it's an amazing day. Thank you.
All right. So then let's jump right into it. And again, let's because we only have Dr. Flo till 4 o'clock. I want to discuss with her some of the things that has happened or has not happened in 2021 in the health and medical field. Dr. Flo, what do you think? And you can say COVID, but it could be something else that had the most impetus and the most impact health related in 2021.
Well, that's a really great question. I mean, I think the obvious answer, right, is COVID, just in the way that it, beyond just the infection, it was dominating our thoughts, it was dominating our conversations, and it was also dominating the way that we're living our lives, which is having far-reaching implications. And so I like to talk about the secondary effects of COVID. And what I mean by that is there's the infection, there's who gets sick, who's hospitalized, and unfortunately the people that we've lost from COVID. And then there are the secondary effects, which are all of the people who were caregiving for those people, who are in those people's lives. And then, it also includes those of us who have, been impacted. Did you lose a job? Did your job take off and start requiring you to work 18-hour days? Were you terrified that you were going to contract this virus and spread it to the people that you love? Have you been separated from your emotional support network and your physical support network? And all of those ways, have you gained the COVID-19? Have you lost the COVID-19? Have you gained the COVID-47? Like, what does this look like, right, in your life? Where is your mental health? How connected are you feeling to your community and the people around you? And those are the secondary effects of COVID. So I would say I'd be remiss if I named anything other than COVID, because even if you are a person who has another chronic condition or something else, COVID has been layered on top of that and has really shaped your life for the last almost 2 years. And so that is the number one, health condition that's facing all of us right now, and continues to.
So we can have a discussion on COVID like for 365 more days. I'm just curious though. No, we don't want to do that. I'm curious as to what would be your number two. That's probably a little bit harder.
I mean, how deep you want to go? Because my number two would be capitalism. If we're just out here naming stuff, right? My number two issue would be that a lot of what we're seeing in terms of patterned health outcomes come from racism. American racism is born out of capitalism. We created an underclass so we could steal and genocide one group of people and steal another group of people to work the land for free, right? So a lot of what we're dealing with is the result of capitalism, the way that we don't care for one another, the way that we don't offer protections to one another, the way that we don't center each other's humanity. Like, have you ever taken just 10 steps back and thought to yourself, we have this beautiful, lush green planet, and somebody decided that our highest purpose as ourselves is to spend most of our daylight hours staring at screens and doing things other than playing in the ocean and tilling the land and enjoying our families and all of these things. Like, if you think about it, if you just think about an alien coming to, Earth and observing this, the entire setup is absurd. It makes no sense. And then we're trying to adapt to this setup that doesn't feed our souls. And then at the end of it, we just die. Is that a cruel joke? Are we serious right now? And so I think sometimes we do have to take that philosophical approach to, we have one life, it's short, and we have a certain number of minutes that we get to spend in it. And so are we doing that for our highest purpose? Are we doing that in a way that feeds our soul and is collaborative and makes the people around us feel good? Or are we, just kind of mindlessly participating in systems that don't serve us and are ultimately harming us? And I think capitalism is one of the ones we talk least about, but it's having this outsized impact on our health and well-being and, our experience in this human form.
So, Robin, you have anything? Do you have anything to add?
I mean, first of all, it's rude of you to ask me to go after that. That's what I'm saying. Off tops. I
wasn't going to. No. That's on you.
Period. However, I will say that I am in complete agreement. I don't know that I would have named it capitalism, though counting on Flo, I can always say that naming it capitalism, it will be in the conversation. I would have named it racism, but it truly is two sides of the same coin. So the reality is that all of the negative health effects experienced by African Americans are rooted in racism, rooted in capitalism. So, our negative health outcomes as it relates to lack of access to clean air and water, that's redlining, that's racism. Our negative aspects as it relates to our relationship with healthcare, that's racism. All of the things that I am keenly interested in and spend most of my career trying to remediate, racism. So the reality is, if we eradicate capitalism and just actually just give it away like it was supposed to be, the earth was intended for all of us, maybe we could all just be healthier. We'd certainly be happier.
So the question is, how come it seems like the African American community, which is very much affected by COVID, is one of the least vaccinated groups, and it seems by choice. First of all, am I right or wrong about the by choice part? And how come that's still going on? And I'll let somebody answer that.
Well, I would say that, it's complex. So I would say that, yes, vaccines are currently being offered for free to people in multiple locations and are being, strongly encouraged. But I also think that the concept of choice is a difficult one. I'm telling you, it's all philosophy, right? Because it actually popped up in my memories that a year ago today, I said, the complexity of all of this is that we're holding multiple truths, right? And the truth is that America is racist, as Robin just named and claimed, right? And we have done really messed up things. Our institutions have perpetuated harm to people. We've been dishonest, and we've done nothing to build trust. And if you are Black or brown, that times 1,000. We've been terrible. And we also have, made scientific breakthroughs that have improved our health and well-being in some ways. And we live in a place where, 77% of our population doesn't have a high enough health literacy to be able to accurately follow the instructions on a medicine label. So we're asking people to understand, messenger RNA vaccines and, complex science. And we're also asking them to trust us in a time where we've done nothing to earn that trust. And so we are, we're in that kind of, boy who cried wolf kind of situation where it's like, we have done nothing to earn your trust, but now we have this group project that we need everybody to participate in. And you're like, you've never done your assignment before. Why am I joining this group project with you, right? You've burned me. And so for a lot of people, it's that. And so I hate to call it mistrust. I think it's well-earned skepticism. I think it is the result of having not done what we needed to do as institutions. And so there are a lot of people who are concerned, who want more information, and who are in a position to really be able to make that decision. I think there are other people who are just not interested, who've made a decision. And sometimes we have to respect that, feelings aren't facts, but they are part of our bodily autonomy, and they are where we land on things. And so that's where we are. So I wouldn't describe it as simple as choice. I would say it is as complicated as our experience in America, in terms of, how we're seeing things and how ultimately it shows up for us. In terms of Sacramento County, though, I would say that, for percentage wise, about 47% of the Black population in Sacramento is at least partially vaccinated. Our highest group is actually our Asian population, which is at 81%, and our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander population, which is hovering around 77%. But our Latino, our American Indian, Alaska Native populations are all there in the 46 to 48% range. And our white population is hovering just above at 53%. So we're not lagging, at least in our county, far behind in terms of people who have had doses administered. And I think, I think again, that speaks to, just where people are in this and how we significantly politicize something from the outset. And one of the things I'm reflecting on is that we don't have a good concept of being able to say, I learned new information and I changed my mind. I think a lot of people anchored on, I'm not sure about this vaccine. And then that turned into, I'm skeptical about the vaccine. And we don't really have a way to be able to pull back on that without lodging hypocrisy at people, right? And without wanting to sort of condescendingly say, see, I told you so, right? And it's like, why can't we just give people a path to change their minds and evolve as human beings? We all should. I don't want to be stuck to the bad decisions I made at 18 or the bad positions in politics I had at 18. Every year I want to get better, and I want to look back on myself the year before and say, wow, I can't believe you thought that, but I'm glad you grew up. And
so I want to thank you. I wanted to ask Terry, because he's his time is short with us also. I wanted to talk to him about the young African American male population who, for the past 100 years, has had a problem with authority, has a problem with police, has a problem with politicians, problem with authority. And so is there reluctance to get the vaccine? Is this an authoritative problem, Terry, or is it something else?
Is it authoritative in relation to police and politicians? Did I catch that part?
Well, anybody who they consider to be of authority that perhaps they don't trust.
Well, I think the distrust comes from not wanting to unify with authority, because then they can continue on in their behaviors, is half of that. The other half is the disconnect between authority and our young African-American men, based on, in a lot of situations, they've been, it's not innocent until proven guilty, it's guilty until proven innocent. And so there's no way to trust a politician or a law enforcement who's coming to you saying, hey, let's work together, let's do this and all this kind of stuff, when you already know that there could be a trap at the end. And then with the gang fighting, with the things that we have in our culture that are negative, and the lack of parental supervision, that adds in, because when we were growing up, I'm sure you and I, the neighbors would parent us and supervise us, and and the community would call us out for skipping school and all that kind of stuff, right? So with that gap between the lack of parental supervision, the lack of community love because parents get upset, the lack of access to wonderful things that can change courses and careers and all that, and then all you have left is the law enforcement who, and in most cases, our African-American law enforcement have stood by to a lot of brutality, a lot of killings, a lot of shootings. So when authority comes up to a young Black man, I think he feels his life is at stake. He feels like, what? I just saw this on the news last night where my homie, my cousin, got beat down, got shot, or, by law enforcement, supported by politicians, and or was convicted on something he was innocent of. So I think more sources have to be produced from within our culture. More programs have to be laid out that are trustworthy, that are proven trustworthy for our young Black men. And then we also I just personally feel we act and we jump, we do protests for 30 days, it's all over with. We protest against everything else, but we don't protest against the own disobedience and violence going on within our culture. And I think that in a lot of cases, there's no one put out in the front as an example to say, I'm going to be the lead for us and try to not balance out, but bring in a group of our people and lead them in a way that can be more beneficial as a culture together in one movement, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. And I wanted to ask Marcus a question. As a journalist, right? Tell you something about back in his day, because he's not gonna say our day, but back in his day, there was this guy named Walter Cronkite. And Walter Cronkite was supposed to be the most trusted man in America. Now, mind you, in my community, Walter Cronkite was just a guy, you know what I mean? But to a major portion, he was the most trusted man in America, and he was a journalist. Now we find out that, oh my God, Chris Cuomo, he just got fired because he did some awful things helping his brother. My question to you is this: as a journalist, do you see your medium as corrupted, or do you still believe that what you do is real and important and a major source of information for the African American community and the community at large?
Well, to answer your question, it's a two-part question. So I'll answer this. Of course, journalism is important, and it's going to continue to be important and continue to be an important source for the community to get their news. But with that, it's really protecting the free press. That's really what you're focusing on, where it comes to, journalists who may not be ethically correct, or where you're getting your source in this information and it's biased or it's leaning towards one way. That's pretty much going to happen based on publication and what they believe in. Really, it just goes up to those who are really in control, whether it's your editors or your program directors or whatever the case may be. And that's really what goes into that. But for me personally, I completely believe that as long as the journalist, the reporter maintains his or her integrity, then the information isn't going anywhere. You can continue to trust the news. As far as I'm not going to speak on anybody else's situation, but I know for me personally, creating the relationships and being as transparent and holding myself accountable and holding other people accountable is what people are asking for. That's the only thing. And so as far as I'm concerned, that's the number one priority when it comes to disseminating news. And it's just right then and there. I think overall with the entire conversation about trust, though, I think it's really within any industry or any capacity. When there's trust, there's involvement. I actually just got off of an interview today with the judge, and we were talking about how African Americans need more involvement within the legal process and voting and things of that nature. And we came to a point in the conversation where we realized that the reason for the lack of involvement, and this goes for any capacity, is because there's a lack of trust. More times often than not, when you trust someone or you trust an entity, you're going to involve yourself with that organization or with that person here and there. Terry, earlier you were just talking about Terry earlier was just talking about gang violence in our community. Well, why does gang violence happen? Well, we can go to the systemic issues as to why that is, but from our position, there's no one else to guide these young men except for the persons who they look up to. And it starts with little things like food, clothing, just little small things.
Marcus, those aren't little things. I appreciate the context, but according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food is like your foundation. Without food, you got nothing, right?
Little things,
let me correct that. Thank you, Robin. Let me correct that. Not little things, but
the basic thing you crave when you're born.
The basic necessities to life is what they're given. And then from there, it turns into, well, I'll protect you. And then that turns into, well, do you need money for this? Do you need money for that? And then that turns into, well, you start getting respect in the streets for doing this, that, and the third. And then you start to self-actualize yourself and say, I could be this. And that's the entire cycle that goes on. But it starts from trusting that individual. So whether it's we're trusting our mentors, whether it's we're trusting our educators, whether it's we're trusting our politicians, our doctors, it starts with the trust. If we learn to trust, then that's when our involvement comes. But our involvement isn't going to be there if we're not trusting them. And like Dr. Flo said, for many reasons in the past, we haven't had a reason to trust those entities. And so that's where I look to moving forward as we move from 2021, move on to 2022, and as we continue this fight. It's how do we find a place to where we as a people, we trust these entities, these persons that are in charge and moving the chess pieces here and there. And if not that, how do we continue to get our people in those spaces? Going back to what you said about, going back to tying this back together with journalism, for me personally, that's why it's important that Black journalists, Black reporters are in these spaces. It's the reason why Black outlets such as the Sacramento Observer, whether it's KDEE in Sacramento, Black outlets aren't going anywhere, because at the root of it all, when it comes to our people and what we're looking forward to and what information we're looking to crave, we can always trust our people with that. And that's where I believe trust lies, is you have to continue to keep that trust maintained.
Thank you. So yes, wait, one moment, because a couple of things. I want Terrence Martin to know that we haven't forgotten him, but Dr. Flo is leaving us soon. So Robin wants to jump in, but then Robin, what I'm hoping that you're going to do is also transition us back to Dr. Flo, because you said that she has some interesting stuff to talk about before she leaves. So go do your thing now.
Aaron, stop mansplaining me. First of all, I know how to do my job. Second of all, Flo's my friend. Stop trying to get points with Flo. Anyway, back to what I was saying. In tying this all together, it's very clear. You talk to people from different industries, right? We've got a doctor, epidemiologist. We've got a young up-and-coming journalist. We've got Terry Moore, who's been working with the community for years and understands finger on the pulse about what people need. And every single one of them talked about trust. Every single one of them talked about integrity. Every single one of them talked about transparency. It's clear what's needed. It's just a matter of how we get there. And I appreciate the fact that Marcus has several ideas, I think, that could be raised up around how we can get there. But the reality is, we asked Flo to talk to us about what's going on with COVID. And there are many news outlets, including the New York Times, that have said we have done a poor job of educating our populace around COVID. There was a huge misstep, not just from the government in the beginning, but also from doctors, as Flo indicated, talking about it as too advanced, too highfalutin, too far removed from what our system of education has prepared people to be able to receive. And then we blame them for not understanding and being accepting of the issue. And so we have to find a pathway back. Flo said this, there has to be a Rosetta Stone. What is going to be our COVID Rosetta Stone to help people find their way back into the good graces of their conscience to be able to take the vaccine? Because we've seen, we're already up to Omicron. And I don't know if anybody else is paying attention, but all of these variants are based on the Greek alphabet, and O is in about the same spot in the Greek alphabet that it is in the United States alphabet. So we're pretty far deep into our number of variants that have come up, and it's because the people aren't vaccinated. The host, the people, mix it up in their bodies, the COVID disease, and it changes to something else, and then we have a variant. All of that comes because they're not protected against COVID. There you go, Flo. There's your explanation that is good for everyone. It mixes up in the body. And now You can't get less sciencey than that explanation. So there you go. You're welcome to use that. Don't forget to Flo, tell us about it.
You're absolutely right. And I think I want to bridge something that, Marcus and Terry both touched on, which is, when we're talking about trust here, I think one of the things that brings all of this together, and I would be remiss if, Aaron, to your point, I didn't, wear another hat while I'm here. I'm the chair of the City of Sacramento's Measure U Community Advisory Committee. And one of the things that I bring up a lot is that Measure U is, I think, the best example of how you can take all of our highest aspirations and then do absolutely the wrong thing with them. And what I mean by that is, anytime you pass a sales and use tax, it is what we call a regressive tax, right? It means that you make less money, you still have to buy goods and services. And so you are going to contribute more proportionately of your income to that tax than people with higher income. So anytime you pass a tax, you are effectively taxing the poor. They are paying more. People who look like me are at the bottom of the income, spectrum because of racism. So when we pass this, we're saying we want to do all this community development. And what I see and what I feel like is a yes and to Terry's, analysis is that I do see people in our community who are upset about violence. I do see people working hard on this. I never heard, somebody being killed or being harmed in our community and us go, well, nobody cares about that, and keep it like we're sad about it and we're mourning. And part of what we're also doing is we've been asking for youth programs, and we wanted a youth budget, and we have been saying we need to invest in a quality education. And the Black Parallel School Board has been saying y'all racist and stop, the school to prison pipeline. And the people who are doing food justice are saying, why are people living in food deserts, and why do they have access to unhealthy foods, and why is this so expensive, right? People are talking about all the system dynamics that Robin and Marcus and everybody brought up, and those get a blind eye turned to them. We're told no, the money comes out and it all goes to the police. And we say, nobody asked for that, literally like a meme. Nobody said the police need more. Nobody, absolutely no one, silence. And you're like, police, here, please take the money on a platter. Would you like, is there anything else you like? Whatever you like, right? Bark like a big dog. And I just don't understand why we do. I mean, I do kind of understand why we do that, but when we talk about trust, it's also that, right? It's when a city council and mayor full of homeowners, and in many instances, they're also landlords because they own multiple properties, say, we don't want rent control in the city of Sacramento, knowing full well that Black people, and in particular Black women, are the demographic most overburdened by housing costs. So all of this comes together because then when the pandemic hits and people are losing jobs, who's least likely to be able to afford their housing? And so there's literally a council meeting happening right now where they're talking about, homelessness and affordable housing. And it's like, that is a Black issue. That is an issue that is affecting certain people more than others. And it's layered on top of COVID, and it's layered on top of all this other stuff. And so what I see in my community is constantly deaf ears being turned when we ask for things that you're supposed to support. Why can't I send Black babies to school and know that they're not going to be suspended and expelled disproportionately for no reason? Don't turn around and then say, why y'all shooting each other after you showed wanton disregard at every turn when we've asked you for the things that are proven and that there are models to show reduce community violence. Don't come to me talking about symptoms when you've done nothing with all the preventive asks we've been charged with. And in fact, your ancestors and some of you, your contemporaries, are responsible for the policies that created the risk factors in the first place. Like, that's the part that's frustrating to me, is this like cognitive dissonance of y'all don't care about shooting in the streets. And I'm like, you don't care about education or healthcare or universal basic income or making sure my babies got food or keeping schools, safe for them, or whether or not I got enough tree canopy so I can sit outside and catch the damn bus. But you want to come and talk to me about the outcome, the consequence of all of your just, abdication of responsibility.
I think if I may interject, and that's a lot of that is the conversation that we're having. There's so many inequitable practices that are layered in racism that are still not being talked about. And it goes, and Dr. Flo, you made a very great point that I want to touch on, is that from my reporting, from conversation that I've had with community members, and Dr. Flo, you're one of them, it's not that the people in the community aren't doing the work. there are plenty of people, plenty of nonprofit organizations, plenty of businesses. There are plenty of people, advocates, day by day, out minute by minute, second by second, doing the work on the ground. It is the institutions, it is the organizations, the directors above that aren't listening to the request or adequately listening to the request and honoring those requests. And that's where really, Aaron, to go back to your question about journalism and the news, that's where really equitable practices and news coverage comes in. There's so many inequitable practices occurring right now that aren't being talked about, like Dr. Flo says, that's a blind eye turn to. That's when it's up to the media to step in, as powerful as we know the media is today, to step in and shine a light on these practices that have continued to systemically put us underrepresented or marginalize us for whatever reason, because we know when we've seen through different examples and through different individuals, different areas, that when the resources are there, so is the success, so is the trust and everything else that we talk about.
And the disproportionate effects. I mean, when you say disproportionate, sometimes it sounds like a spin doctor move, but disproportionate means the population size is X and the results to that population are amplified in greater amounts. So if we start talking about health disparities, Flo brought up the income inequality pieces. We could talk all day long about educational inequities rooted partially in those unfair suspension rates. But if you have 11% of your population is African American, but 85% of your suspensions are African Americans, and 93 of them are 93% are African American males, that's disproportionality. And it doesn't make me feel good, to Marcus's point, when he says people aren't listening. I shouldn't have to tell you that. That's math. It's not my opinion about how you're treating a situation. That is mathematically borne out in the numbers. I didn't opinionate about any of that. So the reality is, until directors, leaders of organizations, systemic change makers put their money where their mouth is and look at the numbers and stop being biased, because the only way you don't see the disproportionality is if you're not looking for it, because it's there. And we have to financially accommodate where we have needs. So if we need to explain healthcare better, then we need to put money into that. If we need to better educate teachers so that they are not in fear and frightened and offer up children for suspension, then we need to put money into that. If we need to ensure that the kids have someplace to go after school because of Terry saying that the neighborhoods aren't taking care of them anymore, then schools should be taking care of them. So the reality is it's a financial piece, and Flo blew it up out of the water. If we as a populace voted for a tax that was supposed to do all of those things, and now it's not because somebody felt like it, that's where the problem is.
So Flo, Dr. Flo, we're coming in on 4:00, and what I want you to do, please, is to take us into your vision of 2022. So before you leave us with 2022. Is it apocalyptic, or is there hope for the future?
Well, I can't see into the future, so I have no clue. Because 2022 could be great, or it could be more of the same, or it could be, like there's no monopoly on pandemics. There could be more. So, and then there's also this climate change thing that's looming over us, which I will never understand why some people think like, oh yeah, we should just destroy the planet and the air and stuff. Like, do you have another source of oxygen you're going to be breathing? Because I'm really confused. Because if anything, it feels like we're all in this part together. So That space plan is not a good one. So I say all that to say that I don't know. What I think we should be committed to going into 2022 is to mobilize and work together. I mean, I can't say enough that, you know, one of the things I like a lot about Sacramento is it is a pretty collaborative place. And I don't like to compare places because I've loved a lot of the places that I've lived, but as an adult, this is the place I've lived the longest, over 10 years. And I have seen a lot more collaboration than I have competition here. And so I like to laud the things I like to see here. And I think it's really cool. And I would like to see us collaborate more. I think a lot of us are trying to do the same things. And I think if we can find ways to not all be stepping on each other's toes, but to be able to dance at a party and scoot by each other, we can have a really rocking party here and we can do something really powerful. So I want to encourage us to organize. I want to encourage us to take good care of ourselves. And I don't just mean in the like individualistic way that self-care shows up as commercialized, but I mean feeling our feelings, connecting with the people who love us, doing things that spark joy, spending time in nature when the air quality isn't trash, like doing those things that really make us, you know, connect us to our humanity, remind us of our purpose, remind us of, you know, why we're here. And I think that's part of what we do to survive while we're also working together to be able to address systems. And I think, you know, part of it is each of us figuring out what our role is going to be, what our piece of this challenge is going to be, and that we try to make new mistakes each day instead of repeating the old ones. And that we leave, you know, a set of new challenges for the next generation to pick up and not the same ones. And I am thankful that at least in my, you know, Black lived experience here in America, that each generation has left us with better problems to fix. You know, there's no point in time I would go back to and say, yeah, it was good to be Black back then, but now not like it even if it's not great, it's always improving. And I think we come with a rich, you know, cultural tradition that I think, you know, should be lauded and should be celebrated. We weren't just given trauma. We've also been given some real gifts in terms of what we provide and who we are to each other. And so I really try to remember those, that my Blackness is not just disparities and trauma, it's also Black joy and love and togetherness and, you know, and music and dance and laughter and all of those wonderful things. And so that's what I'm going into this time of reflection with.
See now, and I'm going to take what you said about music, dance, joy, and laughter, and that's what I'm going to take with me and say, this is what Dr. Flo has given us, okay, for 2022, okay? That's what I'm going to do.
Marcus is going to teach you how to properly quote and cite people.
You know something? What I don't know, I don't know. So we are, wow, Robin, we are in the first, no, we were at the end of the first half of our last podcast of the year.
Well, I got to tell you, we've got some powerhouse guests here today. I have to say thank you very much to Terry Moore, who had to leave us a little bit early. I always appreciate and deeply love my sister, Dr. Flo Jean Kofer, my girl. We have a date on the calendar coming up here soon to dance. And
yes, we do. Woo! All right.
I'm super excited. I would have been very sad to see her here and not have a plan for our future. So I'm super glad that that's coming up. And, you know, we've got a lot of great things planned for the second hour. So I will say farewell, aloha, hasta luego to my friend, Dr. Flo, and I will see you in person, up close and personal real soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Right now, you're listening to Square Biz, official podcast of Flower Square, Sacramento's Black Wall Street at 2251 Flower Road in the heart of South Sacramento. By the way, we have a museum there. We got 70 stores and services and nonprofits and for-profits. We have a whole bunch of things happening, and we just got done with Black Friday. All right, and coming up in March will be the uh, home buyers and rental conference. In July, we have the second year of the Small Business Success Summit. And then in September, we have a youth conference. So that's just three of the many things that we have planned at Flower Square. So our future is so bright. We're going to need shades. You know what I mean? So anyway, let's take a 1 minute break, and we'll see you. Well, I guess in 60 seconds. And we are back. Aaron Boyce with
Robin Rosehammer.
Well, wait, hold on. The wonderful
Robin Rosehammer.
There you go. And this is Square Biz, the official podcast of Flower Square, Segment's Black Wall Street. And I like saying that because it's so important that we have actively and purposely put together a conclave of small businesses that are 100% minority owned. And it is the only place that I know of in Northern California, Southern California, maybe even the United States, that has such a large proliferation of Black-owned businesses under one roof, doing great and wonderful things together as a family unit. And that's why we call Flower Square Segment's Black Wall Street. And yes, the owner, Tom Donaldson, is himself an African American gentleman who's been holding down the fort since 2003. That's a long time, 2003. So kudos to him. So I wanted to discuss, as I mentioned, a whole bunch of things. So we're gonna run through it. We all may not have a chance to speak, but let's see how we do. 2021, and by the way, this is not in any sort of order, just things that come into my head, and you tell me what your thoughts are. Let's start with something ridiculous, okay? Let's start with the storming of the U.S. Capitol. Marcus, what can you tell me about that?
White folk went crazy and showed us who they really were. Seriously. No, I say that jokingly, but no, what that was on January the 6th, 2021 was a wake-up call to America. And what that wake-up call really was that we live in a tale of two separate Americas, where certain individuals have a certain privilege that another group or groups don't have. And by that, I mean to where we're talking about the U.S. Capitol here. Let's just put respect on American soil, as we're all Americans here, okay? This is the U.S. Capitol we're talking about. And in my young life, I don't see at any point, I would have never imagined at any point that rioters would not only invade the steps of the Capitol, but actually get inside the building, and security, armed forces, police officers, Capitol police officers would just turn the other cheek, really. And so for me, that was kind of different watching that on TV, because you and I all know, if those individuals had darker complexion skin tones, they would have been sniped from all the way from the Oval Office. So for me, what I saw was a tale of two different Americas, and that was a wake up call. And that was a wake up call saying that it's kind of what Dr. Flo was saying before. We need to come together. We need to mobilize and organize, because there seems to be America right after that. I could say that it hasn't necessarily died down, but what that was a wake up call to see that America has the opportunity and has the potential to shift in a different direction, to where if we're not unified with one another, then there's going to be extreme chaos in America, and that's one of the many things that I took from
Boom.
one of the many things that I took from the insurrection.
All right. Who has another point of view on the storming of the Capitol?
Well, go ahead, Terrence.
It was just sad and unbelievable. I'm 56 and I never thought I would ever see that. And like Marcus said, like if they were a darker color, for one, they wouldn't even got to the steps. They wouldn't even got to the step. They wouldn't even got to the gate probably if they were a different color and everything. But like Marcus said, it just shows us how, a color changes everything.
Yeah,
And, it's just sad. So, and, that's it. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead, Robert.
Just to interject, I don't want to cut you off or anything, but to interject, it's not only that. I think what that was 2020 happened. You have to understand what went on at this time, right? This was, if it's not necessarily shortly, but 7 months prior to the summer 2020 protest for racial injustice against not only George Floyd, not only Breonna Taylor, not only Ahmaud Arbery, but every single unarmed Black death that went on, that occurred, and that continues to occur in America. So it was really an answer to all of that going on 6 months later. And from that point, from May, June 2020, and for the rest of that year, everybody's mindset was the equitable agenda, the for all people agenda, or the Black agenda, this, that, and the third. And so that's what everyone's mind frame was. And so thinking it's a new year, we're continuing from where we were in 2020, we're moving forward to 2021, and this new year, we're going to keep those practices up. And that's what the insurrection to me was also. It was another eye-opening moment to say, every time you think you're making forward progress, we're going to show you something that puts in the back of your mind that you still have a long ways to go.
So new topic.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
like I said, I wanted it to be quick. And Robin, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris took office. Now you were extremely proud, extremely happy with Kamala Harris taking office. My question to you, are you still as happy today as you was back then?
Of course. I mean,
Okay.
she is still the first African-American vice president of the United States of America. She is an eminently to be respected woman, and her resume, her dossier is so fierce and so tight. We all can only hope to be like Kamala when we grow up. So the reality is I'm extremely proud that that circumstance exists, and only wish that we could get a win. Right when President Obama took office, the economy was crap, and he had a Congress that was completely against him. So he had to work super overtime to get anything of note accomplished because of racism. So Kamala is not in a dissimilar position, because not only does she have to deal with the first pandemic that has happened worldwide in 100 years, but she's got to deal with the thing that all of us got to deal with, and that's her white boss. So the reality is Kamala is doing all she can. She's playing her position. And anyone who speaks ill of someone who is in the get along to go along role, they don't know how the game works. Kamala is doing all she can.
So
Yeah, but they still need to cancel those student debts, though.
That ain't Kamala's job. We better.
Now,
Senate.
I looked at Joe Biden's record because the things that he's done, and I keep hearing about how his ratings is lower than Trump's, is one of the lowest in presidential history, and of course the Republicans would like us to believe that he is incompetent and that he hasn't done anything. However, if you were to look at the things that he's done in his first 100 days, I think anybody who looked at that would be very, very impressed with some of the things that he's done, which includes working on student debt. You know, uh, um, um, giving billions in support for meals to children affected by the pandemic. Of course, making sure that so many people are vaccinated, rejoining the climate of the Paris climate talks. Okay,
But the
rescinding.
reality is, Aaron, all of this is done, all of this conversation about Joe Biden's success or lack thereof is done. Flo's not here, but I'm gonna bring her back. Right? She said COVID is layered, and we can't just put COVID as an illness on this little top of the shelf and forget all the other things that fall beneath it. People are sad. People are depressed. People are broke. People are broken. People don't have jobs, or they came to realize that their employer didn't love them like they said they did. So anytime you find yourself in that circumstance, you look for someone to blame and you start to point fingers. And Marcus probably knows way more about this process than I do, but how these polls are taken is through a complete it's a biased lens, first of all, because how you ask a question has everything to do with how people answer it.
Of course.
And the reality is they're not putting his litany of successes in front of the people who they're asking the question to. They're saying, are you mad about inflation? Are you mad that gas costs so much now? Are you mad that the cost of your groceries has gone up? And people are like, yeah. And then they say, oh, Joe Biden's approval rating has fallen. So the reality is we're not asking the question that really answers the issue of whether or not has Joe Biden done a good job, or what we really want to know, has Joe Biden done right by us? This goes back to the trust conversation. That goes back to the integrity conversation. Go on ahead and get it, Marcus.
Okay, it was burning, and it's funny because when you say has Joe Biden done right by us, this is the same Joe Biden that was famous for going on the Breakfast Club and saying, if you don't vote for Joe Biden, you're not black, right? And so what's funny to me is, and Aaron, you say all the great things that Joe Biden has done. And the question for me is, he's done all these things and he's talking about he will eventually cancel student debt. Has he made a law outlawing and restricting, prohibiting the killings of Black people? Has he made that illegal? Has he made that a federal law to say that you cannot kill Black people that are unarmed? Or how about this? Has he made it an actual hate crime to say the N-word while in attack or killing a Black person or anything of that nature? Has any attacks on Black people simply for their skin color, has that been deemed a hate crime federally? And I don't want to put any demographics or any ethnicities and races against each other, because I love everybody. I think we're all here to serve the same purpose and be unified. But for me, I look at it as, why is it that the Asian community, they get the Asian hate crime immediately? LGBTQ community, they get a hate crime immediately from a string of attacks. Black people have been getting strings of attacks for decades, centuries, and there's still not any law that will prohibit that. And so, as admirable as all the things that you say about Joe Biden is, and trust me, I'll be one person to raise my hand and second that with you. But I have to raise the question as, if you're doing all of this and you did XYZ within the first 100 days, why is it the same demographic, the same group that year in and year out, election in and election out, is the same demographic that sways every election? You pretty much verbally begged on your knees and said, I need your vote. If you don't vote for me, you are not what you say you are. How can you go and say that? For me personally, for me, that's where I stand. You know, where if you're going to call on the Black card, if you're going to use the Black card, when are you going to repay that Black debt for me? That's where I stand. Don't ask the Black people for your vote and say we're not Black if we don't vote for you. And then once we get you into office, there's nothing that advocates that directly says this is for the African Americans in the United States of America. And I'm all for being wrong. I'm a humble person. I'm all for being wrong. So if there is a bill or something out there that says he has done something, show me. I'll be the first to apologize.
Mm-hmm. So Terrence, saying that, Marcus obviously doesn't know that we have indeed overcome. He must have missed that memo. You see, because we have favorable outcomes in the trial of George Floyd and favorable outcomes in the trial of Ahmaud Arbery. Doesn't that mean that things have gotten so much better? Doesn't that mean that we have overcome? Terrence, what are your thoughts about that?
I'm going to say not that much like Marcus and everything. I agree 100% what Marcus is saying and everything. We get one and then we get pushed back 10 times more and everything. So, George Floyd, that was, tragic, but, he got his justice and everything, but it's still going to happen, it's happened probably 30 minutes after they did him. They don't kill somebody, back east. Of course, we didn't hear about it and everything, or they have so many different ones that they're, brushing under the rug that they don't want us to hear about, that's going on in America and everything. So I would say, just a little bit.
Has it really been a little bit though? I mean, when you look at George Floyd, I mean, I'm glad that young girl had the courage to get that video out. But sometimes, I'm petrified in my thoughts and in my nightmares. So I'm just thinking, what if she hadn't? Mm-hmm. Would we even be talking about a George Floyd? And we're talking about justice, but to me, it's more so accountability. The courts really were just holding the police accountable, because what justice did George Floyd get? What does his family get? He's not here today, unfortunately. And that's, for me, that's what I look at. And when we look at that, the Minneapolis Police Department in particular, while that was going on, they had another unarmed shooting. I believe his name is Dante. I forgot his name. But one of the police officers killed a man the same week that they were protesting about George Floyd. We talk about that. We talk about Ahmaud Arbery, his three murderers. They're going to be. They were found guilty, right? It's just guilty though. We haven't even seen a sentence yet. Mm-hmm. They can be jailed for 2 years and then be out. So what justice have we really gotten just yet? When it comes to the Kyle Rittenhouse situation in Wisconsin, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, yeah, he came from Illinois, a white kid, and shot white kid, 17 years old, shouldn't have a gun anyway, but he did. Shot 3 guys, killed 2, all of them were white. The media won't tell you that, but a white guy came and killed white men at a protest for Jacob Blake, and he was found not guilty of that. Everybody was upset. Here's the thing that they're not talking about though. In the same place, Kenosha, Wisconsin, there's a Black girl who killed her rapist, a person that's sexually assaulting her, that's defending herself. The same argument that Kyle Rittenhouse used, and she's still in court right now for that. See if they're going to use that argument for her or against her. And so for me, when we talk about freedom and we got this victory and we have this moral victory, what victory do we really have when there's still institutional issues, systemic issues that are still going on? I mean,
well, to your point also, Marcus, it doesn't feel like a victory when we all have to wait with bated breath, because we don't know whether or not that's going to have a positive end. The only thing that I will say in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, and this is different than in any case previously, not only were the people who shot him held accountable, in theory, you're right, they haven't been sentenced yet, but there is an investigation into the district attorney who didn't originally charge those men in that case. We can also say, if we want to talk about asterisks, none of those people are police officers. So in the difference in the case of Ahmaud Arbery and in many of the other officer involved shootings is that these three dudes were citizens and had absolutely no call or right to do the things that they did. And in fact, they had drawn a parallel between the Ahmaud Arbery case and the Kyle Rittenhouse case, because the two guys that Mr. Rittenhouse killed actually had a greater call for justice and the citizen's arrest of Kyle Rittenhouse than the people who shot Ahmaud Arbery. So the reality is, if you talk about the parallels between things that are happening at the same time, we get lucky when they happen at the same time, because then we can lay them over one another and examine them. But to Marcus's point, these things happen all the time that we either don't talk about, or again, back to Flo's comment about COVID not just being about the disease, but about everything else. We are burdened with stresses about everything else. It's real hard for me to understand what's going on in New York right now. It's real hard.
Robin, I want your opinion on this, because as we talk about shootings, we talk about police shootings, right? And that's awful. School shootings is awful. Public shootings are awful, and I could be wrong. I don't think so, but in the hood, when there is a school-related shooting, normally it's a targeted situation. It's a fight. It's a gang situation. These bullets are meant for somebody. When there's school shootings outside of the hood, like the recent case here, the recent case in I forgot where it was. In Michigan or Colorado, which one?
I think they were actually both.
Okay. So this gentleman, he's a Caucasian person, and he brings a gun and he's just shooting. As far as I know, there was no name on that bullet, and this is what I see happening in a lot of suburban school shootings,
where the shooters are mainly white males,
or white individuals who have no names on the bullet. They're just shooting randomly. I mean, they are a spree shooting situation. My question is, obviously, these are tragic. No one labels that white on white crime, I might add. No one says, "Oh, look at that, that's white on white crime." They don't. So people are dying. Yes, our young black males are also dying at the hands of each other, right? What are your thoughts about so-called black on black crime? And now let's label it, if there's black on black crime, let's label it white on white crime. Okay, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think one of the things that Terry pointed out is, and I think Marcus raised the point, and the stakes even higher, as we talked about how gangs come to gain membership, right? So if you live in a neighborhood that is under-resourced, that doesn't have safe parks and safe thoroughfares for children to transverse on their own. To Flo's point, you've got single black moms just trying to make the rent, and it's the highest percentage of their income than any other demographic group. So they're at work, right? And they're trusting that they've raised their children well enough to be able to get to school and get home by themselves, because they can't be there to get them to school and pick them up when school is over and get them home. So you have people who are taking advantage of that in a capitalistic manner, back to Flo's point, that these folks that are in gangs are going through the recruitment process of young black and brown children in those communities. So are we saying that we should vilify this young person who's just trying to eat, just trying to be safe in their community, just trying to live in a different manner than somebody who is privileged, someone who's not getting their way, someone who has had some opposition in a space and they're unaccustomed to opposition. And so the way that they choose to handle it is by destroying that environment, because that level of disappointment or that level of angst that they are experiencing is too great for their fragile little psyches to handle. So if we're comparing school shootings and Black on Black violence in urban communities, it's like comparing apples to Volkswagens. It's literally not the same thing. The only thing that is similar about them is it's gun violence. And quiet as it's kept, we don't really want to talk about gun violence very much in our country because we don't want to talk about gun control. So I think it's perfectly fine. I think everybody should be able to own a gun. I think we should make bullets cost $1 million a piece. And that way you have to really think about whether or not you want to shoot somebody because it's expensive.
I think that's perfect right there, honestly.
That's perfect right there, huh?
That's perfect right there. I mean,
Put it in their pocket.
talking about gun violence. I actually had a conversation with a friend the other week, rather. It's Tuesday. So, and we were talking about gun violence in America and versus a place like the UK who actually have a grasp upon gun control. However, though, that turns into knife violence being up, and that was what was raised. That was the argument that was raised, is violence, and if people want to fight and kill each other, then they're going to do that. They're going to find a way to do that. If you take away their guns, then they're going to bring a knife, and knives to me are more easily accessible for, let's say, a 6-year-old or 7-year-old rather than a gun. And now we're talking about first graders getting into knife fights. So to me, the question and the conversation isn't necessarily about gun violence and gun control. It's the totality of violence as a whole. And how do we prevent violence as a whole? How do we really focus on these mental programs in place? How are we really raising the kids, and when it comes to a parent, when it comes to a household, we have to really focus on whether you're a Black kid or you're a brown kid, white kid, purple, yellow, it doesn't matter. We have to really focus on, at a young age, why are kids more upset and more depressed than they've ever been. And truth be told, this kind of diverts the conversation a little bit, but if I could just throw this nugget in there, you have to look at who's really raising the kids. Robin, it goes to your point. You were talking about, parents, mom, or sometimes mom and dad, more times often than not, it's just mom. She can only hope that she's done a good enough job while she's working a 9 to 5 and maybe even another job after that and trying to put food on the table. But when she's gone to work, where are her kids at? Let's just say they have brothers and sisters, right? Okay, so they're with each other. But if you have a single kid, if you have a single child, who raises that kid? Normally, it's the schools, it's the neighborhood you're in, and the things that they watch on TV. A lot of things that we don't understand is for kids, it's not necessarily who they hang out with. It's not necessarily, who's in their inner circle. It's what they see visually, whether it's on their TV screen or on their social media apps. That's what it's really about. And depending on those images that you see, that's what really is going to make or break a kid at such a young age.
Marcus
and that's
is
where
preaching.
I'm trying.
But let me bring in the issue of mental health, which those two words have not been said in this conversation as of yet. Mental health, and whether you're dealing with someone in the hood who has to deal with family drama, poverty, hunger issues, that can affect a person's mental health just as much as if you're dealing with somebody who lives in a upper middle class community who is not, okay, they are not getting the style of car that they want in the color that they want for their birthday. Well, Robin, I was taught a long time ago that you can't qualify mental health. Mental health to somebody is just as serious as mental health to somebody else.
Well,
And
that's
so,
you're
yeah.
absolutely right, Aaron. But the
Mhm.
bottom line is, and this goes back to what Marcus was just touching on.
Mhm.
We didn't have the kind of mental health issues that we have now 30, 40, 50 years ago, when TV wasn't 24 hours a day, when access to the internet wasn't completely unblocked and unfettered, and you didn't have these artificial apps and entities influencing our mindset, right? If you look at somebody's Instagram profile or their Facebook profile, you usually see the picture of a perfect life. And if you compare that to your reality and you start saying, oh, every time I see Marcus, he's got on the flyest outfits and he
Yeah.
always is so slickly done. And I saw him posing with the Lamborghini and all of those things, because I'm taking Marcus's social media life as Marcus's real life.
Mhm.
When the reality is we don't nearly often enough, and Facebook is facing a lot of flack about this right now, especially with the exposure of folks who are under the age of 13, because they knew this was starting to get to them and they didn't do anything about it. The reality is, when social media took over our lives in terms of the amount of small screen time that young people put in, we started a losing battle with people feeling good about themselves, because there are way too many images that are out there that say, I'm not good enough, I don't look good enough, I don't have enough things, and that what I have to offer the world isn't nearly as good as what these other people have to offer the world. The worst thing that social media has done for us is filters. Filters on photos has ruined us, because we don't see what people really look like anymore. The only thing that you get is this airbrushed version. You used to only be able to access that level of insecurity in magazines, right? Because you had to have all of that high class, high expensive equipment to be able to airbrush a photo that went in a magazine. But you can do it from your iPhone now. And it doesn't take but a second to, I have had multiple friends say to me, oh, let me see that picture before you post it. Or you can't post that picture. Or, oh, let's take a picture with a filter. I don't do that. I am too old and too cute to need to think about trying to put a filter over this beautiful face that God and my mama created. So the reality is, we haven't done enough for people to make them feel good about their real lives, because we make them feel insufficient about everybody else's fake life.
Well, now, that's not true, because as I move on, I want to say that we have legalized cannabis in so many places. Isn't that what America needed the most? Terrence, let's talk about that, okay? Let's talk about the legalization now. In all seriousness,
They can just come to my office and I'll test them anytime.
but the legalization of cannabis has indeed had a major effect on persons of color, though, in terms of arrest and incarceration. Now, that's a big thing, right there. Okay, but what are your thoughts about what Robin's saying, about what Marcus is saying, and anything of your thoughts about the legalization of cannabis all over the United States?
I think it's probably, one of those bad ideals that they did and everything. I don't think they should have made it legalized. The only reason why they made it legalized because the capitalism of the money that they're going to make off of it and everything. I'm a type of person that I'm not going to spend no money on anything unless it's going to give me my clothes that's on my back and everything. So I am one of those type of persons where I don't gamble or anything. If I do put something in the slot machine, it's going to be no more than $5. And unless they're going to tell me that I'm going to get it back.
But what Terrence said is, if it don't make dollars, it don't make
Don't make
sense.
sense.
That's
There you
right.
go.
That's right.
So, you know,
Well, I've
that-
had my hand raised for
Oh,
over
yeah, that is
10
true. I'm
Oh.
minutes,
sorry.
Aaron, and you
Go
completely
for it.
ignored me.
I am
I
so
guess I'll wait
I
you
am
out
so sorry,
because
Josette. Okay, please,
I've
please.
had my hand raised for 10 minutes. That's all
And I
right.
was about to
I'll
say
join
something and
in
I didn't
on the
say it. I am
cannabis
so sorry.
conversation.
Okay, go on, please.
From the previous speaker, we are completely opposed. I highly agree with legalizing cannabis. I work with young adults with developmental disabilities, and a lot of these clients are placed on psychotropic drugs and prescribed medicine. And I just believe in the medicinal effects of THC. So when I see that my clients can have a normal, happy, healthy life, and they are able to use marijuana effectively, I'm all for it. I'm at the point where I wish I could. I have several clients that have cerebral palsy that use CBD oils. They use it because a lot of my clients that have mild and moderate intellectual disabilities or autism really find that it helps them with their anxiety and their depression. So, you know, you're always going to have a point and a counterpoint, but I'm all for it. And so, especially the fact that it's legal, they can go in to a dispensary, purchase it on their own. And, you know, if people didn't want to buy it, then regardless of capitalism, it won't work. So there's a big enough audience out there that's keeping it as popular as it is. So I'm all for it.
I think just to kind of piggyback off that, I like what you said, Joseph, and you know, I think what she said is completely right. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you do it or you don't. It's literally that right there. And I don't think it's only because of the dollars that were coming in. I think, you know, as we continue to progress in time, and you know, the way I feel logically would be, you know, the way minds have changed. It's only would make sense that they legalize it because of, like you said, Terrence, the money that comes in, but the demand for it, like Joe said, is saying. I mean, if you have so X amount of people that want it for whatever reason, and it can make billions on billions on multi-billions, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry is what I'm saying. I don't think there's any reason to legalize it. I mean, and for me, I'm just gonna give you guys the time. I'm gonna age myself here because I'm the youngest one on the phone, on the call, on this podcast. Born in 94. So you have to understand, in California, 96 is when they legalized it medicinally. So you can have your little weed card, your little marijuana card, and you go into any dispensary in California. That's 96. By the time I get out of college, or I'm still in college, 2016, 20 years later, it's legal. It's ready to go. So for me, in my generation, we've always grew up with, hey, it's just weed. You do it or you don't. It's like alcohol. Either you drink or you don't drink. It's either you dance or you don't dance. You know, either you like Nike or you like Adidas. It's your preference. It's pretty much what you want to do. And so for me personally, I just think that as time has progressed, California, of course, but I think the United States needs to see it as this is a way that we can right a lot of wrongs when it comes to those who have been locked up over marijuana charges versus charges such as crack cocaine or even murder charges that people have either gotten off on or gotten a lesser charge. So there's that conversation that goes with the legalization of cannabis. But even then with that, even with legalization, as it can do a lot of wonders for people, it's been legal now for 3 going on 4 years, and there are still you know, traps really for some people, like for those that want to get in the business and become distributors. There are many programs that are really preventing them from being one of those entities that hold a dispensary or hold a place to distribute and grow. So there's so many different obstacles still as people of color that we're still facing with the marijuana industry. And everybody knows that even going back to when marijuana was kind of first introduced to America, it was really because African Americans were using it, and And other people are saying, well, they're really good at jazz, they're really good at doing this and that. It must be the marijuana, so let's make it legal. Let's illegalize it and put them in jail. There's that component to why it was illegalized, and to have you now, although it's legalized, there's still obstacles to keep us from entering these
I want to piggyback on
spaces.
that. There's absolutely huge obstacles. I remember sitting in a city council meeting and they were talking about how many dispensaries you could have in a per capita area, right? And they were saying, oh, well, and there were small businesses. Everybody raised their hand. Hey, I know how to make edibles, candy, gummies, whatever. And it was like pulling teeth in order to even get a permit, right? Or to get a business license to file to be a dispensary. It was like, I want to say it was 40,000 to start with, not counting it had to be so far away from the businesses, the schools, and the whole 9 yards. I want to tell you guys, I just came back from Southern California today. I just drove in this morning and I saw a dispensary, no joke, Aaron, it was as large as Florence Square.
Wow.
I could not believe it. It was right off of the freeway, a huge place called Empire, right? So it was called Empire Dispensary, and it was in the Inland Empire, if you guys are familiar, San Bernardino, Riverside area. And I was so curious, like, how is this place so huge? And I drove around being nosy and I saw where, you know, their windows were tinted and all of that. You could see the trees. You could see the plants in there with the lighting growing in there. But when you look through the front door, and I kid you not, it looked like a grand hotel. It was a sprawling staircase, lights, LED, huge LED monitors. I mean, it looked like you walked into a Vegas hotel. And I was like, wow. I mean, I was just like blown away how big and huge this dispensary was. But all I thought about was, I know it's not Black owned. And so it kind of bothers me that why we as a culture cannot get in on this on a higher level. I mean, when I hear about the green rush, right? And we're talking about all of these different businesses popping up, farming it and growing it and turning it into candy, food, putting it in all of these things. I'm not understanding why we're always late to the party. And I do remember when someone had proposed putting a dispensary in Florence Square.
Yes.
I thought it was a fantastic idea. I don't
Let
think
me
let me I thought it was a great idea.
let me move on, because there are two things that I want to discuss. The last thing is 2022, our thoughts about the future. But before we talk about that, the Women's Tennis Association was very upset because one of their female tennis players in China went missing after complaining about sexual harassment. And so she went missing. And although there's been a public, hello, here I am, the Women's Tennis Association is still thinking that, it was staged. And so there are some human rights issues there. My question to the panel is, when we have all these problems here in the United States, how important is it for us to focus on and to understand and be aware of and even assist in places like China and Russia and Syria, the Middle East, parts of Africa? How important is the world when we are dealing with all that we have here? Marcus, why don't we start with you?
You know, you're treading political waters here, Mr. Boyce. That's what you're doing right now. I mean, you know,
that's what I do.
Simply, you know, United States of America, as powerful as a country as we are, and although we are powerful and we have our own issues, there happens to be other issues going on beyond our borders. And the way allies are set up, you want to make sure that you take care of your friends so that way they can take care of you. because the last thing you want is your friends, your only friends, because as the United States as a country with a terrible history, we don't have many friends. You don't want the few friends you have to turn into enemies, and those new enemies link up and connect with your old enemies, and now you have a bunch of enemies coming after your country. So with that being said, as I completely understand, I've had many conversations where we say there's so much going on in our country. Why do we always focus on what's going on beyond our borders? And it's just a political move to make sure that we make sure we keep our ties connected and make sure we keep all parties happy. It's unfortunate, but some got to play the game. It's just networking.
Well, not necessarily on a political standpoint. I'm talking about us, the people on the ground, the people who are going back and forth to our daily lives and having to live all of this mess here in the United States. How important is it to us what happens overseas?
Oh, we don't care. I mean, I speak. I don't want to speak for everybody, but from a lot of people that I talk to, I exactly what I was just saying. As far as the political aspect, we have to talk about that. We have to care. But as far as us, the people actually here, we don't care. It's like I just said, right? We have so many different other problems going on in America. Why are we focusing on what's going on beyond our borders? We talked about plenty of things, whether it's mental health, whether it's racial issues, whether it's job loss, whether it's the housing crisis, whether it's climate control. And that's just 5 off the bat. But there are so many issues going on right here in the country. I think as Americans, and I think that's our right to only solely care about what's going on here. I think we all maintain that right.
Robin?
I as a citizen of the world, I think that we have no choice but to have some level of accountability for our brother. Should we allow that to distract us from our primary function, which is our survival? Absolutely not. But should we care that something bad is happening somewhere else? Absolutely. If we lose our humanity, if we lose our concern for what happens far away, it's not too long before we lose our concern about something that's happening close up. And I do think it requires us to have a certain level of discipline so we don't, get caught up by bright lights and shiny colors. But the reality is an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And I didn't say that.
No.
Dr. Martin Luther King did. So the reality.
But you said it well, though.
Thank you so much. I would love to hear that from him one day when I meet him in glory. So, but the reality is that a lot of these stories come up at opportune times when we need distracting from something that's happening presently. So I think that we do need to have enough discipline to know that we need to take care of home. We need to be concerned for our brother. We need to be largely focused on what our immediate needs are in and around our physical surroundings. But if we lose sight of humanity everywhere in the world, then we've lost our humanity ourselves.
And so as we are winding down, and DJ Soup has just joined us. He is a radio personality on KDEE, so we're very glad to have him here. The last question is 2022. Now, I asked Dr. Flojoy Kofer her thoughts, and she left me with what was that? Love and joy and I forgot, but just happiness. That's what I got from her. Yeah, she says some other stuff, but that's what I got from her. What I would like to know from you folk is, where do you see us in 2022? What is your prognosis, or more importantly, what should we do to make sure that our 2022 is going to be strong and profitable for us and our community? And let's start with Terrence, please.
Okay, thank you for asking that question. For me, for 2022, I would like to go back to our normal life that we were in 2019, but I don't think we're going to see that in 2022. This COVID I don't think it's going to go away so quickly and everything, because they keep having another one after another one after another one and everything. So I would want to get back to the normal life for me and my kids and everything. And, just, live life that we're supposed to be living and everything. Be happy, not live life scared and everything, because that's all everybody basically is stressed and scared about, COVID, everybody getting COVID, or is they going to die from it and everything. So live a better life and everything. And I just want to thank you guys, because I have to get on a 5 o'clock class for my co-parenting right now. So I just want to say thank you, and thank you for having me. And I have to log off and everything.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Josette, same question.
Well, I'm not sure what 2022 holds for us. I know it has made our nonprofit look a lot different than it did when I started in Florence Square 2 years ago. So I don't know, I'm very hopeful, but I do want to let everybody know, please don't think the vaccine and the boosters, is it. Because I will just tell you, I have a client that was diagnosed with COVID yesterday. So it's still out there, and we still have to be careful. And I think a lot of people get complacent, they're getting lazy. We still wanted to be around our families and we miss them, but we're risking our health still. So I would say, it's a new normal for 2022.
Okay, thank you. DJ Soup, I know you just joined us, but did you want to answer the question?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I just wanted to concur with the previous two speakers regarding both sides. Kind of makes sense to me, and I do believe that there is a way of getting back to normal, but also a way of having a new normal. I myself have, kind of been going 100 miles and running. I haven't really slowed down. I've actually kind of sped up. So not sure how that happened, but I'm just staying diligent, sharing information as much as possible. Yeah, I'm just hoping that for 2022, everyone can continue to share ideas and collaborate and find ways of, continue to be sustainable, and not just sustainability. I used to think that was all there was to it, just sustaining my business, but growth is really important too. That's one thing I learned this previous year. And so sustainability and growth at the same time, I think is, the goal for 2022 for me.
Thank you. Marcus.
2022 for me is I like what was said about it being a new normal, but I think it's really just progression. I mean, things have just progressed. I mean, for me, when just briefly on the COVID conversation, I grew up in a time where we had to have certain shots to go to school. You had to have certain flu shots. You had to have your pneumonia shot and things like that. That was for me growing up, going to school. So honestly, I see it as just history continuing to repeat itself, and we have to take the same precautions that we would always take. Get your shots and practice healthy practices, such as, of course, washing your hands, using hand sanitizer, things of that nature. But as far as the rest of 2022, I mean, I'm really adamant about growth and progression and just always being better. And so that's the only thing I could really ask for as we look to 2022. How can we all as individuals be better in some capacity, in some form in our daily lives? And if we can really work towards that, then we'll have a better 2022 than we had 2021.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Robin.
I think time is a gift. And if we continue to remember that we are only here for a short period of time, just to echo the words that Dr. Flo spoke, it gives us a little more conscience about our every moment and every day. And while I completely empathize with us and this new normal or the struggle that we've been operating in COVID, if it's done nothing, it's taught us some things. Like, we need to be vigilant. We can't let our guard down about our loved ones, about our health, and about our circumstances. And as long as we get complacent, then things like mutations and different iterations of life come up at us, and we're not prepared for them. So I appreciate Marcus's perspective around, the vaccination being just among the things that you have to do to prepare yourself for day-to-day life. And I think that in that previous conversation that we had about should we be concerned about things that happen in other places in the world, COVID didn't start in the United States. And had we paid some attention in January of 2020, we wouldn't be in the circumstances that we were in right now. So being vigilant, understanding that everything is not always what it seems, working on our personal integrity, working on our personal transparency to help build trust is one of the ways that we can change our 2022. We started this conversation off really rooting it in racial inequity and talking about how we came to be in this circumstance. And the reality is, Black folks in America have been dealing with this for over 400 years. So it's not new, and it's not over anytime soon. We have to stay truthful. We have to stay compassionate, and we have to stay honest with ourselves and our loved ones if we are going to survive and thrive. So that's how we get through 2022.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I would like to dedicate this broadcast to all of our loved ones and friends who we have lost through COVID, and especially Miss Dana Maisha. She's been such a friend to Flower Square, but I'm dedicating it to her joy of life, her joy of living, her joy of education, her joy of mental health. Although she's no longer with us, I believe that joy is still with us. And I want to bring that with me to 2022. Yes, I am a fan of the vaccinations. I have mine, and I plan on getting the booster. I believe in being careful, staying vigilant, and tying my camel. At the same time, I want to have fun. I want to enjoy myself. I want to live. I want to do business. I want to wake up with every day, not knowing the great and wonderful things that can happen for me during that day. That's how I lived, and that's why I want to continue to live even through this, because there's a whole lot of things happening, good and bad, besides COVID. And so I want to be able to stay vigilant against all the stuff that we talked about that could seriously stop us from having the lives that we want to lead. And I want to embrace all the other stuff that we know that with a little bit of love and a little bit of dedication, we can live our lives. So yes, of course, I'm telling people, get your vaccinations, stay masked, do things that make sense, common sense. And of course, now it's a personal decision, and people want to fight and argue about that. Not me. I'm just saying what works for me and what works for my family. So as I go through 2022, I'm going to bring the joy of love, the joy of life, and the joy of education and the spirit of Dana Maisha. And I'm hoping that her family understands this with the spirit of love that I am going. But that's what I want to do as I go through 2022 2022. I thank DJ Soup. I thank Joseph. I thank Terry Moore. I absolutely thank Dr. Florgia Cofer, and I can't wait for her to come and join us again. Marcus, wow, I'm so glad that you joined us. You are a man of great intelligence and wit, and I thank you for that. I thank Desiree for being our background person. This will be on social media, so she's gonna help us to do that. Did I forget anybody at all? Oh yeah, huh? Terrence, right. Oh wow, I did forget Terrence. Okay, Terrence, absolutely. Thank you very much. And Miss Robin, my wonderful co-host. You know something? I'm writing a song about you. It's a sonnet, right? Wait. Before you say no, before you say you haven't heard it yet. Okay. On the next podcast, I think I'm gonna perfected it. I'll have it for you then. It'll be the first sonnet of 2022. So
I will wait with bated breath.
I'm sure you will. Until then, I want to say thank you to you, the listener, and you have indeed been listening to Square Biz, the official podcast of Florence Square, segment of Black Wall Street, with your host Aaron Boyce and
Robin Ruiz-Hamer.
And we bid you peace. Good night.